yesterday's episode, I'm now moving on to talk through episode 105, 106, and 107. But before we get started, I want to talk briefly about something I don't think I've ever talked about before, but since I've been producing ASMR videos since February of 2024, I've realized just how difficult it is to find peace and quiet. We live in a world where there are sounds all the time, everywhere, and when you produce ASMR, you turn up the gain on this microphone so that I can whisper, and it creates hopefully tingling sensations for some of you that can experience ASMR. And I try to produce episodes during times when there are not many noises, but you know what? It's tough. It's so hard to do that. And I've just become more aware of sounds. Like right now when I move this paper, I'm sure you can hear that. And yet, perhaps it is peaceful. Now, in my condo, there's a strange noise that I hear sometimes when I turn on the microphone. I don't know what it is. I think it's something upstairs. It's mind-boggling. Because normally, you know, I've got the air conditioner going. I've got my fans going. I may have some music, kind of not real loud, but I may have music going. And so sometimes we're not aware of the sounds that are really all around us. All around us. All around us. Anyway, I wanted to talk today, Wednesday and Friday, about having cash on hand. And I want to thank the viewer that sent me the email at evanthomasbroke@yahoo.com. Thank you so much for this question, which inspired me to create these videos, even though, as you guys know, my mind is on Hurricane Milton at the moment, and yet, as I always say, the show must go on, because I've been dedicated to producing episodes for you on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, and I enjoy doing it. I hope it relaxes you, and I hope you're learning little tidbits of financial nuggets that can help you keep your mind where it needs to be on money, but still living your lives and having a good time. I hope that makes sense. And right now I can hear that noise. Do you guys hear that? It's like a high buzzing noise. I have no idea what it is. That was my stomach. Yeah, that's another thing. Since doing ASMR, I realized how much my stomach makes noises, and it tends to do so more when I'm concentrated on hurricanes. Yeah, go figure, right? Nobody wants to come back to their home and have it be underwater. But this is the risk I've decided to take, and the irony of this is that this is going to drop on Monday, which we still won't know what's going on. The hurricane is supposed to hit on Wednesday, so you'll watch Wednesday's episode and Friday, and I will have already known what took place. Anyway, to get to the question about cash on hand today, I want to talk about cash on hand. It's such a good question. Like, how much cash should we have? And when we come back Wednesday, I'm going to talk about what I've done with cash through the years. And then I want to talk about how cash affects retirement too, because you guys know cash on hand is, again, such a really great question. So for those of you that are in your 20s and your 30s and even your 40s or maybe even your 50s, I guess that includes a lot of us, right? I've always heard, especially by watching the Susie Orman show through the years on CNBC, I remember she would tell people that, and the school of thought is very different in terms of having cash on hand, because you've got, on one hand, you've got an emergency fund, and the other hand, you should have cash on hand for times when you may lose your job. Okay? So you have to navigate having cash in a safe place for an emergency fund. So let's take those one at a time. For an emergency fund, make sure it's for an emergency. You need a new refrigerator. You need a new hot water heater. You need a new air conditioner. You need a new washer and dryer. All of those things are going to come up. So what I like to do is I like to create a spreadsheet, and I put down how many years I think until I need something. If you have a home that you own, for example, you may need a roof. So at what time do you want that roof? When do you have to replace it? And then you back into how much money you'll need by that date. So if it's a 5-year goal, how much money of your income would you have to save in your emergency fund to earmark for that expense? You are planning in advance for an emergency. That will happen, right? So that has always served me very well. Of course, I'll talk about that in a couple days, my own experience, but having cash on hand, most money coaches, most people that I've listened to over the years say that you should have between 3 to 5 to 8 months set aside, depending on how you really think about your current income. If you have a job that you feel like you're 100% secure, of course nobody is 100% secure, but if you feel super secure, then maybe you can have less, okay? But you should always have that money set aside for an emergency. And the irony is that you're working to build up an emergency fund, and you can have an emergency while you're building it up. So you just have to do what you can do and err on the side of saving more in that emergency fund than you may need, I think is a good idea. Now, on the other side, I said that you also want to have some money in your emergency fund earmarked for if you lose your job. Many of you know that have been watching my channel for many years. I did get very lucky in that I have had the same career path with the same company for 26 years now. But the first 8 or 9 years was not so lucky. I went from job to job, job to job. I kept losing a job, getting a job, losing a job, getting a job, and this went on and on and on. During those years, I really struggled with even keeping like $1,000 in an emergency fund. But if you get to a point where you've got your emergency fund, follow people like Dave Ramsey, etc. They teach all of the concepts of baby steps. And you definitely want to get to a point where you have enough money set aside so that if you do lose your job, you can pay for your essentials. But let's break down essentials. I remember probably back in 2006 or 2007 watching the Susie Orman show on a Saturday night, and she talked about how to figure out your essentials. Right now, everybody has expenses. You've got your rent, your mortgage maybe you have cable, maybe you've got the internet, maybe you've got all these other things, car insurance, your car payments, I already said auto insurance, homeowners insurance, renters insurance, etc. Everything you have in your build a budget. But be thinking right now that if you do lose your job, emotions if you don't have cable. I don't have cable, and I do just fine. I stream things through the internet. Do I miss cable occasionally? Yes. Do I miss paying $150 for it? No. So, in times of struggle, if you are to all of a sudden lose your job and you go through a period where you're just surviving again, then you could color code on your spreadsheet those expenses that you could do without if you lose your job. Now, I actually think that you can do without those anyway, and you don't need them. That's just me. But I'm not most people. So, identify those expenses and come up with a number that is what you would need on a monthly basis if you lose your job. Because then that number will be lower, which means it stretches out the number of months that it could pay for. Because it could take you 3 months to find a job, 5 months to find a job, 9 months to find a job, or a year. So the longer you can stretch out your cash on hand for that type of an occurrence or situation, the better. Now again, as I think about closing this episode, all of us have our own journeys, right? I had my bad years in the early part of my career. I guess that was a good sequence of return risk for building wealth, if you think about it, to anchor back to a true sequence of return risk in the stock market, which means if you have diminishing returns in the first 5 or so years of retirement, that could mean that your portfolio may not last as long than if you had those diminishing returns later in your retirement of a 30-year time frame, especially if you're taking 4% off of whatever is there. The same is true that if, like with me, I made all my mistakes early on. Those first 9 or 10 years, not only was I a financial train wreck, I just wasn't making a whole lot of money. And so that's better than if it would have happened later in my career, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and close today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the question that came my way. For those of you that have questions for me, email me at evanthomasbrook@yahoo.com. I will create a series of episodes on your question. If you guys, did I say if you like content